I'm not arguing that people shouldn't have electoral perspective or shouldn't vote or whatever. What is needed in this country is a party that is truly accountable. I have no illusions that the Democratic Party politicians are going to be accountable because there's no institutions in place to make them accountable. What we need is a party in which working people can decide on the program, can decide on the tactics, a party that's organized not just to run in elections, but a party that's organized to fight in strikes on the streets, in the workplaces, in the communities, on a program of fighting for universal health care, bringing the troops home, decent jobs for everyone, and social programs all around. And there's got to be individuals ready to fight for that now or it'll never happen. And we got to get ready to fight for that now. And steps concretely to move towards that can be raising that in the campaigns of intervening and building the campaigns of left Greens and fighting for a working class perspective in that. It can be calling coalitions of trade unionists, of socialists, of people in the Green Party, of people in the anti-war movement, ready to break from the Democrats now, to not only run candidates, but also to organize to fight in the social movements as well. And I think that also social movements play a role in that struggle. An increase in the labor movement, working people coming onto the scene of history and fighting for better wages, fighting for better health care, will automatically bring them up, not just to get up against the Republican Party, but it'll bring them up against the Democrats as well. Anyone notice locally in Massachusetts, Deval Patrick just announced a budget of $515 million in budget cuts? $100 million of that to come from Medicaid. He's cutting programs, funding for blind people to be able to get education. Funding necessary social programs, cutting funding from necessary social programs in our community. If we're going to fight for a better life now, we're not just going to come up against the Republicans, we're going to come up against the Democrats as well, even those like Deval Patrick who claim to be on the most progressive and accountable wing of the Democratic Party. And that's what's going to happen. And in order to pave the way to create that type of political party that's needed, which I would call a workers' party, in order to pave the way for that now, it's not to take a wishy-washy position, sometimes the Democrats, sometimes not, but it's to move forward and train people now to make those arguments so that when the time comes when struggles break out and people are more open to the idea, there is no one that's going to play that role is not going to come out of nowhere. It's individuals that are going to intervene in those struggles to make that happen. That's how the Free Soil Party was built. They didn't hope for the Whigs and the Democrats to make things better. They went out and organized to abolish slavery. And I think the issues in front of us today are just as critical as that, because we're facing very dark times ahead if we allow this two-party system to go on any longer.
I think when we talk about American politics, I think what Americans have falling to the trap of believing is to analyze their political system as if it was European or the British or the Canadian. I mean, you could start with Deval, you can start with Clinton or whatever. I mean, amazing amounts of funds. But where's that organizing network right now? I mean, there's this assumption that somehow, like, you will elect this individual into power, and then, that's a silver bullet. Everything's, all the problems are solved. And I think that's wrong. I think we're still sitting around here, waiting for that individual, that party, and yet we don't have that political system. It's not like Canada, it's not like South Africa. The party, there is no real party discipline on sort of fundamental issues. And so I think what's needed at first, when talking about a new political formation, is just an acknowledgement of that fact, that I think there's great amounts of work that can be done from progressive movements, but they have to follow through after an election so they actually can press elected officials to answer to the needs of working people. But I think secondly, though, there needs to be like a separation between the work that's done on the field, that is, say, unions organizing individual workers, and then the need for political representation to actually advocate for those rights. I mean, Dr. King went on the lines marching for civil rights, etc. And I'm sure, like, if he lived much longer, hey, who knows, he might have seen himself sitting in a position of elected office. But that did not happen. The movement still needed people to represent it, like in political positions. And so to have a movement without the connection to political power, I think, I mean, we did this for 4 years when the Republicans were controlling Congress, very frustratingly, marching on the streets, trying to get the war onto the table, and it didn't. We got to Democrats that, I admit, they're not doing the best job with the debate, but there is a debate, and there are people who are representing certain aspects of the debate. I think there's only certain perspectives you can take on the war anyway, and most of those perspectives are being represented in the Congress, and I think that's what's needed. I mean, there were, as I said, there were just huge mobilizations that took place that never made national media, which is very frustrating, as you comrades would totally know what I'm talking about. But there needs to be that aspect, and so I just want to stress the fact that I mean, even in countries where there is more political discipline, like the New Democrats in the New Democratic Party in Canada, like the Socialists in France, even those political formations, once came into power, did not, bring about like anti-capitalist political agendas. So I think that's something to keep into mind, that the need for solid social movements that actually won't put all the faith in the party, but within the movement, and will continue to keep the party in check. I think something, a historical note, just to mention, I mean, as comrades, I'm a representative of a political organization, DSA. We're not a party, but we have had a history of working within the Democratic Party. But I think, in all honesty, we have to look back at the historical perspective of the Christian right, who in the 60s wanted to have nothing to do with politics. It was this whole salvation mentality, where we don't believe in like getting our hands dirty. Republicans have let us down. Now we've seen that unholy alliance between like secular, neocons and religious neocons, and somehow they work together, and the one is able to say, hey, like they don't perfectly represent my needs, but for the most part they're gay bashers and they're homophobic as well, and they represent their needs, whereas we on this side are saying, no, like we can't get our hands involved in politics because the Democrats are to this or the Democrats are to that, whilst your voices are not being represented in those arguments. So I'd encourage us to support progressive Democrats in the interim, and until we do have a social movement that is able to actually challenge the Democratic Party and become a party, then to do so.